The full moon hung heavy in the night sky like an oversized pearl in a velvet casket. It was not just any full moon. It was a supermoon, a rare celestial event where the moon, at its closest approach to Earth, would swell in the sky to a size larger than normal. For some, it was a beautiful sight. For others, it was an omen of chaos. In the quaint town of Oakhaven, nestled amid strolling hills and whispering cornfields, the townsfolk had gathered. In the town square, their faces, a mix of excitement and apprehension, were turned skyward. The large crowd held their ground despite the ominous presence of Sheriff Brody Walker. His face was grim, his eyes scanning the restless crowd for any sign of trouble. A sudden commotion broke the silence. A young woman, her face pale, stumbled out of the cornfield. She was disheveled, her clothes torn, her eyes wide with terror. "Werewolf!" she gasped, collapsing at the feet of the stunned townspeople. "There's a werewolf among us." Her last words before she blacked out. Sheriff Brody caught the woman as she fainted, his gaze hardening. He knew this wasn't just a wild animal attack. This was something more sinister, more terrifying. The creature that had attacked her was human, or rather once human. The transformation was too violent, too unnatural. As the night deepened, so did the unease in Oakhaven. More victims turned up, each bearing the same horrific injuries. The townspeople were in a frenzy. Some wanted to flee, while others, armed with pitchforks and shotguns, wanted to hunt down the beast. But Sheriff Brody, though troubled, remained calm. He knew that fear, if left unchecked, could consume them all. Amidst the chaos, a young biology professor named Dr. Amelia Grant stood out. Unlike many in the town, she wasn't armed with a weapon. Instead, she carried a flashlight and a notebook. She was fascinated by the events unfolding, seeing in them a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study a phenomenon that most believed only existed in mythology. As the hours passed, the number of victims grew. Yet, strangely, there didn't seem to be any new attacks. The full moon, now high in the sky, seemed to be the center of a macabre cosmic joke. Just before dawn, when the moon was at its zenith, Dr. Grant made a shocking discovery. In one of the victims' houses, she found a strange blue flower. The flower was unlike anything she had seen before. Its petals were an otherworldly blue, almost glowing in the dim light, and its scent, a strange mix of lavender and iron, she showed the flower to Sheriff Brody, who was pacing restlessly in his office. He looked at the flower, puzzled. He had no idea what it meant, but he trusted Dr. Grant's expertise. At that moment, a blood-curdling scream split the morning quiet. Both Dr. Grant and Sheriff Brody reacted instantly. They rushed out of the station just as the sun peeked over the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the town. They found another victim, but this time the story was different. This victim was still alive, though barely. With a last surge of strength, the victim managed to tell them about a cave outside of town, about a hidden den where the creature lived. With the first rays of sunlight, Dr. Grant and Sheriff Brody set out for the cave. They needed to find the creature, not just for the sake of the town, but because the more they learned, the more they realized this was no ordinary beast. Inside the cave, the air was thick with the stench of decay and something else, something musky and animal-like. As their eyes adjusted to the gloom, they saw a sight that made their hearts skip a beat. In the center of the cave was a large metal box filled with strange symbols and markings, and next to it lay the creature, or rather the human form that the creature had taken. The man was unconscious, his chest rising and falling slowly. Dr. Grant rushed to him, kneeling beside the man. His injuries were severe, but he was alive. Relief flooded her, but it was short-lived. As she turned to leave, she noticed the blue flowers, the same ones she had found in the house, growing from the pockets of the man's clothes. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She turned back to the man. As if sensing her gaze, he opened his eyes. They were a startling shade of yellow, reptilian even. Before Dr. Grant could react, the man transformed, the skin on his face stretching and tearing, his bones cracking and rearranging themselves. In a matter of minutes, he became a horrifying mix of man and wolf, his clothes torn to shreds, revealing a muscular body covered in thick dark fur. The werewolf snarled, baring its teeth. It towered over them, its eyes blazing with primal fury. Then, as quickly as it began, the transformation stopped. The werewolf collapsed onto the ground, reverting back to the man. He was breathing heavily, his body shaking. Dr. Grant and Sheriff Brody stared at him, their faces pale. They had gone from dealing with a series of gruesome murders to facing a real-life werewolf. The man looked at them, his eyes filled with pain and confusion. He didn't remember attacking anyone. He didn't even remember being a werewolf. Dr. Grant, her voice shaking, asked him who he was. The man looked at her, his eyes filled with sadness. "My name," he started, his voice hoarse, "was David Hayes. I used to be the biology teacher at Oak Haven High." It was then that Dr. Grant remembered. She had met David at a conference a few months ago. He had been researching genetics, specifically the study of dormant genes in humans. Could this be related? David explained that he had been studying a gene that had lain dormant in humans for centuries, a gene that when activated could trigger a transformation that brought with it heightened senses, incredible strength, and a thirst for human flesh. But why now? Why did the gene suddenly activate? David and Dr. Grant exchanged a look. They both knew the answer: the full moon. As it turned out, the lunar cycle had somehow triggered the gene, turning David, and as they soon realized, many others into werewolves. With the help of the townspeople, Dr. Grant and Sheriff Brody managed to control the situation. The werewolves, though dangerous, were also confused and scared. None of them had ever been a werewolf before, and none of them wanted to hurt anyone. As the days passed, Dr. Grant worked tirelessly to find a cure. She studied the werewolves, their physiology, their behavior, hoping to find a weakness, something that would reverse the effects of the transformation. Meanwhile, Sheriff Brody worked with the townspeople to keep the werewolves contained. It was a difficult task, but the townspeople, though initially terrified, had rallied together. They understood now that the real enemy was the disease, not the werewolves. One evening, as Dr. Grant was examining one of the werewolves, she noticed something odd. The creature seemed calmer, almost meditative. Its eyes, usually wild and frantic, were now clear and focused. Curious, she sat down next to the creature, keeping a safe distance. To her surprise, the werewolf turned its head and looked at her, its eyes filled with intelligence. It then did something that made Dr. Grant's heart skip. A beat. It smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was a smile nonetheless. And in that smile, Dr. Grant saw hope. Over the next few days, more and more werewolves seemed to find peace in the full moon. Dr. Grant, realizing that this was some kind of wolf-like meditation, decided to try it herself. To her astonishment, it worked. The full moon, which had brought so much chaos and destruction, now seemed to offer a way out. As the moon reached its peak, Dr. Grant and the werewolves stepped out into the clearing. They faced the moon, their backs to each other, and closed their eyes. It was a gamble, but it paid off. The transformation began, but this time it was different. The full moon, instead of causing havoc, seemed to soothe the werewolves, calming their animalistic urges, bringing a semblance of control to the chaos within. In the end, the werewolves didn't revert back to their human forms, but they didn't harm anyone either. They stood there, half wolf, half human, their eyes clear and focused, their bodies radiating an otherworldly calm. As the first rays of sunlight touched their skin, they disappeared into the forest, leaving behind only the faint smell of lavender and iron. In the aftermath, Oak Haven was forever changed. The people were shaken, but they were also stronger, having faced their fears and survived. And as for Dr. Grant, she returned to her research, though she never forgot the lessons she had learned from the werewolves. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters could be controlled with the simplest of tools, understanding, and acceptance.